So, welcome to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. And as I always like to bring you some exciting guests to the show. So, today I am super happy to be joined by Nate Robinson. And Nate is a senior retail veteran. So, he is going to share with us a whole load of insight from a customer facing perspective because he's really passionate about creating a really great customer journey and how we can get our team members to make sure our guests have the best customer journey through the business. So, Nate, super excited to have you here on the show, and thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to be on my second podcast.
Excellent. As we were talking before, these become quite addictive after you've done them a while.
A little bit.
So I know you've got a very seasoned history for wanting. You've worked with companies like AT&T. You've worked in the catering and hospitality sector like me. So I'm just curious. Let's just
Mhm.
start with, where's your passion for this customer-centric perspective come from over the years? How have you got to that being the thing that you love to do and help people with?
I'm a people pleaser by nature. Definitely customer service is one of those skills you either have it or you don't. It's not in between. There's always that. But at the end of the day, as I've continued to move up, customers are what pays the bottom line at the
Yep.
end of the day, if that makes sense. So it's always in our best interest, especially as leaders, to take and make sure that our teams are very customer centric and customer facing. Now, where you've done catering, I did quick service. So a little bit different realm
Yep.
in the hospitality, but it's definitely same concept. One's just a pre-planned event and the other is usually you want to have them in and out in 5 to 10 minutes most of the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
depending on which QSR concept you're
Yeah.
working with.
So explain for me a QSR, quick service restaurant, right? That acronym. Yeah.
Correct.
Oh,
Subways, McDonald's,
yep.
Burger Kings, Chipotle, like those. And there's many different levels. You have your faster ones, like the McDonald concept, and then you have the takes a little bit longer casual dining restaurants, such as Denny's is a big one here in America. I don't know in
Yeah.
the UK, but
Things like TGI Fridays and stuff like that, really. Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Those are still quick service. They're just a little bit more formal, I guess,
Yeah.
in the dining world.
Yeah. Okay. Oh gosh, there's so many places we could go for this. How do you, because there's a lot of talk in this industry, we work
Mhm.
with quite a lot of the younger generation, right? And let's be
Mhm.
entirely transparent here, everybody. In the catering and hospitality industry, we're not the best payers to people. So, how have you, in your experience, managed to motivate and engage those team members on the front line to deliver their best to make sure that we can get a great guest experience?
So I think that comes down to how the workforce is changing overall. Again, what when I was coming up isn't what works anymore
Right.
for how you develop your team, how you get somebody in their 19s to see that this is could be more than a career at this point. At the end of the day, we have to take in I have my 3I framework where it's inspire, invest, and innovate. And again, that's enthralled at the end of the day. We're here to help the customers. But teams are different people, different mentalities, and you've got to learn how to adjust on that. We all have cell phones or mobile phones
Yep.
nowadays. So it comes down to how do I use that as an innovative way to train staff? At one point, I was in early development of the 3I framework, and I had a staff that wasn't understanding urgency. So I had them play Diner Dash for an hour to try and get into that whole understanding. So it's just finding different ways to innovate that training to make it fun, to take and make it unique and outside of the box in the philosophy. Because again, not one size fits all from my perspective as a manager nowadays.
Two things there. I love that. How do we get people engaged and do something? And I'm all about experiential learning and doing things differently. So I really love that. But it is this one size doesn't fit all. And I think I was talking to somebody today on a coaching call, and I think this is the biggest challenge of being a leader and a manager, isn't it? That people want a
Mhm.
play, the A to Z of what to do. And it's not, it's so individual for the individual people that we're dealing with. And that's what makes leadership and running teams and businesses, I think, so challenging. But I invited my client this morning when we were talking about this just to think about it all like an experiment, right? What experiment do I need to use with this person today in this moment? With that gentleman, it was like show him a computer game and help him to get urgency that way. But you don't know until you try what works for different people, is what I'm trying to say.
100%. And at the end of the day, we're all human. Again, I went through many phases of my management style to where I am now. I'm definitely not the same manager I was when I first became a manager because I've gotten experience, right? And
Sure.
at the end of the day, managers have to go through those phases. I can tell the audience here, it's not an easy job. You have to learn to invest in your team, but also keep that boundary in line. Where again, I'm your guys' leader, not your boss, because bosses just micromanage. There's a big difference for me on that. But again, we have, as managers, we're still learning just as much as our teams. A lot of hospitality industries, turnover is a constant thing and it gets exhausting as a manager. I think the longest I've had a staff under me was 7 years before they got into what they wanted. But I'm going to support you on that and help you meet that goal, whether it's letter of recommendation or anything, but investing in those important things because not everybody's going to work in a frontline job for 20 plus years.
Actually, I think that the whole hospitality industry is such a great industry to learn about leadership and management in, because it is very in the moment. You've got to make quick decisions to solve guest problems. And let's face it, we'd love to have the most amazing customer experience and nothing goes wrong, but let's just be honest, things do all the time.
Do we?
And
Yep.
so I think it can really teach people the importance of taking accountability and responsibility for whatever you're doing and getting to a resolution and developing those problem solving skills within team members quite quickly because of what they have to do. So I think it's a really interesting industry from that perspective. So you mentioned there when you were just talking about your 3I framework. Do you just want to share with us a bit more about what this is, why you developed it, and how it works?
So, awesome question. The 3I framework is still an elevating thing. Like, it's never going to stop growing. Roughly about 5 years ago, it drove me crazy. I was getting overlooked for promotions. I was getting overlooked for more challenges. Again, it's just as important as a leader to continue to develop in your career growth as well as your team. But it just got to a point where it was driving me crazy personally when I'd continue. So I took my mini, I was probably at about 10 to 12 years at that time in my career as a manager and started. I'm a very analytical guy. I work in sales. So obviously, I'm looking at this side versus this. But the 3I development came out of taking what I learned from leaders that I still talk to this day and regularly contact them. And then even the ones that necessarily we weren't friends, but we respected each other in that sense. But there were many things. So I took the 3I framework and what are the three ways I can describe my management style? Because one, when I do interviews with staff, I always ask, give me 3 words that will describe. And that's where invest, inspire, and innovate actually came out of that. I'm like, what are the 3 things that I care about in wanting to develop teams? Because at the end of the day, I can't necessarily move up in my roles if my team isn't ready to take over. So again, that's where that 3I framework came at that time.
So perhaps you could just dig down. There are a couple of great things you said there, but first of all, let's just dig down into what the 3 I's stand for and how do you use them? How do you practically use
Mhm.
them?
All right, awesome. So with Inspire, again, it's just what do my staff like? What makes them show up every day? What's their why? So I want to develop that to inspire them. Hey, I love this job, but I want to move into management. Cool, let's get you there. You invest is definitely, I want to invest not just in my store as a manager, not just as my customer base, but my team as well. Again, a team's going to work harder if we invest in them with just making sure they feel that they are part of the team. I can say personally, coming up in the ranks, if my leadership didn't invest in me, I definitely could feel that.
Yeah.
And Innovate, we went over that with the whole, I had a staff that didn't understand sense of urgency. So finding different ways to not just train them, but innovating different ways to market the store. At the end of the day, you want to just not be a one size fits all, as we had said
Yeah.
earlier.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So the three I's: inspire, innovate, and invest. And you make a really great point there about investment. And I love that because absolutely, as leaders, we all need to continue to invest in ourselves, but also how do we invest in our team members? And I think it's interesting because I certainly get the sense that the younger generation, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, are perhaps demanding more investment in them than maybe people of my generation were when I was going through their ranks. I remember there wasn't a huge amount of training really when I was started out in business, and you maybe fought for one. Okay, I started out in business before we even had email, right? So I'm a bit of an old crony. When we got Excel and we got computers, of course, we got technical training, but I didn't have that much leadership training or management training while I was developing. And I'm just curious, what are you finding that the people that you had reporting to you, either at AT&T or in the restaurant sector, what are the sorts of skills that people are looking for? And I know it's different for everybody, but
There's always that core set of schools, right? Be coachable, be willing to just try something new. Don't sit in the back when we're at a rush or whatnot.
yeah,
But I think what makes this interesting, especially for mine, there's 5 different groups in the workforce at this point with all different
yeah,
experiences at the end of the day. And that's unheard of
mm,
nowadays. So this is where the workforce continues to elevate because again, I've had people that are older than me working and they don't like the fact that I'm the younger guy, but their boss. And then,
yeah,
but I think it comes down to the younger generation, anything past me, because I'm a millennial. So, whatever it is in alpha, I don't know, they're
yeah,
too hard to keep
Gen Z
up.
and stuff like that. Yeah,
Um, is they're wanting to be paid what their value is at the end of the day, what they bring to the table. And we have to cultivate that in any industry in there. And as you had said, most of the time, reason that the workforce is people in the hospitality industry don't make enough to pay their bills at the end of the day.
mm,
And as when I was coming up the ranks, it was, you know how to do everything to point A as a manager, but we're going to give you a sink or swim method. And you sort of
yeah,
have to learn on the fly. And I work really hard to make sure when I have staff under me in whatever role I'm doing that they understand my job and their job as well. Because at the end of the day, I might not always be available as a manager to take but that's really where that investment part comes, is because as managers, I know I've been on calls where I was 8 hours of calls one day and my staff were able to handle the floor because I'm just busy working and it's exhausting, but you have to learn that fine tuning on there.
yeah. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that a lot of leaders and newer leaders struggle with, and that I see in a lot of my clients, is that people get promoted to, and the term leader and manager are so interchangeable, right? I mean, I don't know in your experience,
Mhm.
mine, but somebody's now leading a team, but we naturally feel more comfortable doing the role that we were doing before we were promoted. So it's very easy to get sucked back into the doing the work on the coal face because that's where we feel comfortable. And actually, for many leaders, and again, I'm thinking about my coaching client this morning, actually his big challenge was exactly this. He was stuck in the coal face, and actually now he's leading and he's got a team of people. He needs to elevate himself to be a lot more strategic, but he feels comfortable to, as I say, down in the weeds doing that bit, and so we naturally get sucked down there. And actually it's not good for us and it's not good for our team, because then we start interfering with our team and micromanaging and they get frustrated.
I, I agree. And anything for a newer manager, that is one thing. Take and set those boundaries with your team. At the end of the day, you have to invest in your time, and what's because you're now important versus urgent is completely different than
Yeah.
before that. A lot of times with staff, it's an urgent, I need this, and you absolutely, but as a newer manager, take the time, don't sit there and micromanage your team,
Mhm.
but set those boundaries and those non-negotiables. Because again, if I had known about non-negotiables of what I expected out of my team earlier on in my career, I probably would be in a different role at this point. But those experiences that you have and need as a manager at the end of the day are always going to be more valuable than you see it at that point. Bigger picture, they're going to help develop you into who you are as a manager later on.
Yeah, I love that. And I love non-negotiables. I haven't thought about those for a long time. So are you prepared to share what some of your non-negotiables were? That's because for people listening, non-negotiables, the things that absolutely have to happen, right? How do you define
Mhm.
it? Let's take your take on.
So I always have five non-negotiables. I have teams, I coach them on it.
Yep.
Obviously, it's pretty simple. They're not always set in stone. Obviously, be to work on time, take and ask questions, take, be in uniform. Pretty corporate
Mm.
standard. But when I go in there with my team and we've set these non-negotiables, we're all on the same page.
Yep.
They understand that if they don't show up, again, I have it written and posted where we see it every day. You need to go home and get your name tag. That's a little extreme,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, depending on what realm you're working on, that name tag can be the difference between you passing an audit for a company and failing an audit completely. And I use that example because one, I have sent people home for going to get their name tag and come back, but also the simple fact that you have to build the value of why we're doing these
Absolutely.
non-negotiables. Because again, when you're a franchisee and you have to stay within your corporate contract, you have to have those non-negotiables with the team, because that name tag in some, we had a company I worked for at one point that was fined $60,000 for a staff member not having their name
Wow.
tag because they failed their audit. And that's how serious it is. So the whole purpose of the non-negotiables are never to take and be a set in stone, because they should always evolve just like your team, but they're there to set those expectations and make them clear. And as newer managers, I recommend doing that. Think about what's the important in your role of what you want to accomplish with this team. Because again, newer team members now are going to come in and they see that, and we sit down and talk about it.
Yeah. And what I love about that is that absolute clarity, right? Because sometimes I think we forget we have to state the obvious. And an
Mhm,
analogy I often use is you've got to know, if you're a team member, what the
mhm,
rules of the game are. Are you showing up on a soccer pitch or a football pitch, right? Two very different games,
mhm,
and they've
mhm,
got very different rules. And so you need to understand which one it is so that you know what to do. And I think, particularly when you're a new team member in, we can often assume that they're going to know that, but they don't. And I think, as sometimes one of the important things, and we always talk about communication is so important, is actually you got to spell out the obvious. Because why would somebody really know that the importance of having their name badge, right? They see everyone else do it.
mhm,
The world's not going to fall apart if I don't have it. And I think
mhm.
about a lot of the people that I've worked with that never have them, right? But we haven't had such a big consequence of that. But understanding that's one of the standards that everyone's expected to do, I think is so important for that clarity for people.
I do too, because let's be honest, in today's workforce, when they get a new hire pamphlet or a new hire paperwork, they're not reading it. They're just
No.
signing it because they want to get it done.
Yeah.
And when you go to that extreme, I use the name tag just because that is the most extreme
Yeah, absolutely.
that a company I've ever seen. But you think about how to reinvest that information. That $60,000 could be a raise for an employee. But not only is important to have that name tag, but at the end of the day, as a manager, we're the face of that
Yeah.
organization. We have to take and deal with the customers, deal with the staff. Not only are we representing our store in that, but we're also anybody that's above us.
Sure.
And as a new manager, that can seem overwhelming.
Yeah.
And again, non negotiables are such a key part of that early development that I wish some leadership had given me once upon a time ago instead of keep working hard. And I'm like, yeah, I do work hard. But over the last year, I've had a lot of time to just know what I bring to the table now
Mm,
versus necessarily taking and having to work so hard. Not that I'm not ever not going to work hard, but
no.
I have a different lens, if that makes sense, at
Yeah.
almost 40 years old now versus my 20-year-old self.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that each and every one of our team members understands the contribution they're making to the business, right? And where they're
Mhm.
adding the real value. Because if you come home from work every day and you're not really sure, you've done a job, but you don't really understand how that fits into the big picture of what the business is trying to achieve, it's not very motivating. And I've definitely found, and this actually probably more so since the COVID pandemic, that people really want to show up to work and know that they're making a difference to change the needle in whatever way it is, whether it's creating amazing experiences, customer experiences, or helping people get better, depending what industry you're in, whatever you're doing. But you want to walk away with this sense of pride that you've done a great job today and you've impacted somebody's life. And I think everybody at a deep psychological level, we all actually want to make an impact.
100% agree with you. I think that having that sense of purpose in how we go into work, like at the end of the day, as a manager, you're not going to love every day of your work. There's going to be hard
Yeah.
days. But if you go in there with the mentality of, I gave it my all, it wasn't a good day today, but I'm going to come in the next day and have that sense of purpose because your team is going to mirror how you react. Again, at the end of the day, customers are going to come and go, but your team is your lifeline at that point because
Absolutely.
without them, you can't do your job. And vice versa. They can't. A lot of times I saw staff, I'm like, have you thought about being a manager? No, I see how much you go through every day. I don't want to deal with that. I'm happy with my role. And that's great if that's what they want. But you have to build that sense of purpose, not just with yourself as a manager, but within your team too. And that's where that inspire plays into
Yeah.
that too.
For sure. Oh, no, absolutely. And a lot of work I do with my clients is around purpose and what people's individual contribution is, because we know the levels of employee engagement are, I think in the US, they're better here than here in the UK, but I think you've probably only got about 33% of your workforce fully engaged. So two-thirds of the
Mhm.
workforce, I think in the UK, it's only about 10, right? So we're worse off than you are.
Yeah.
But when people aren't engaged, it's no fun. And I don't know about you, but I've worked in some jobs over the years where it wasn't an inspiring place to work. And I used to hate going to work. And all my other jobs I had really enjoyed. So it was a real shock to me
Mhm.
when this happened. And I was like, oh my God, some people do this every single day of their lives. And they're going to a job that they really don't enjoy doing. I just couldn't comprehend how somebody does that because it's just like,
No, yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, when you're going to a job where you don't feel valued, that plays into one specific, from my perspective as a frontline manager, what is the culture like
yeah.
for that? Because again, as frontline leaders or RS retail store managers or even directors, what is that culture and that cadence within that organization? Because if you have, I've had organizations where the culture doesn't make you feel valued. And I've
Mm,
had some, this did what I needed it to do in this time, and I appreciate it, but I'm ready to move on to my next
yeah.
adventure. But it comes really down to as managers and where that 3I, it's to build that culture that you need to be a
Mm,
successful manager. And if your culture is not there, it's going to be a horrible place no matter who comes in.
yeah. And I think as a leader, you're setting the tone for what goes on. You're setting the culture, you're setting the tone. If you come in and you're in a really grumpy mood, then all of a sudden your team are all a bit grumpy and now they're giving grumpy service to your customers. And I think we can sometimes forget about this ripple impact that each of us create as a leader and a manager and how it impacts everyone,
Mhm.
not just in the workplace, but also in our personal lives as well. And we just have to be really conscious of that because we're always influencing and impacting people around us all the time. And it's just a question of whether we're doing that positively or
Or
negatively.
negative, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we've all seen, and I'm sure you like me have experienced the customer who always comes in who's grumpy and starts from that position of this isn't going to be a great experience. And then how actually they always end up, if the server's really got to work hard to get them to a place of positivity because they suck them, if you're not careful, into their level of where they are.
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100% because culture is everything at the front lines,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you're an executive or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made one really interesting point earlier on that I just wanted to pick up on when you were talking about. I loved what you were saying about the 3 words that you ask people for feedback in terms of 3 words. So tell me a bit
Mhm.
more about that because when you said it, oh, I love that.
So that's one of my favorite things. One, it puts a lot of employees on the spot when I'm interviewing because I want to know sort of how do you view yourself? Because at the end of the day, I'm on time, I work hard. I've had somebody say I'm really into video games. So it helps me get to know that person. But more importantly, when I go in interviews, I use that same exact tactic in that because, but mine are a little bit more specific. When I go talk to an employer that I'm a few possible candidate and vice versa, that interview is not to just sell yourself, it's
No,
to take and learn about them. They should
absolutely.
be trying hard. So, that 3 question is just a fun little way to really ask a question to get to know someone in 5 to 10 minutes because you don't know if that person's this is their last interview they're trying to have. Otherwise, they're going to lose their rent as an extreme,
Yeah.
or, but it makes it fun just to ease up. And a lot of people don't expect when you ask that question, give me 3 words to describe you. It's one of those I just picked up on and I've loved.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, oh, I'm not even sure what 3 words I'd use for me. So that's it. And for everyone listening today, I would really encourage you to to answer that question. What 3 words describe you? Because I think that's it's really powerful because it involves quite a lot of self-reflection and how do you
Mhm,
want to portray yourself out there to other people that to give them more insight into you but it needs to
mhm.
be genuine and authentic as well, and
Uh,
not just maybe
100.
work
I
specific.
Yeah, I think authenticity is probably for any manager or any person in general. Being authentic is such a key in today's workforce,
Yeah.
personally. Like, authenticity plays, we're in the digital age where people can get the information super quick. So, again, being authentic is definitely a key to being a successful manager because if you're not, it can be smelled out a whole lot quicker than it used to be.
Yeah, and I know before you and I came on air, I said this is always quite laid back conversational because I am just frustrated and sick and tired of all these AI generated videos and podcasts. I saw an advert the other day that said, I've released all these podcasts and I've never even recorded them. My AI twin did it. And I'm like, really? I think for me right now, authenticity and genuineness is I think the most important thing. And that's why these podcast episodes aren't super polished, right? Because otherwise it isn't authentic. So I just love the fact that we can riff on something, a topic that we're both passionate about. And it's a genuine conversation. This isn't 2 AI clones doing it and making it up. It is what
No,
it is. And that's why we go unscripted and we go off piste. And I never know where these conversations are going to go with any of my guests, which is always super exciting.
100% no. I've really enjoyed being on here and just talking about what I'm passionate about at the
Yeah.
end of the day. And developing people is such a key part that managers sometimes tend to forget.
Yeah, and I know we need to bring this to a close, but I think that's such an important point because I think so many managers nowadays, in the old days, team development and people management wasn't really part of the role, was it? That was something that HR did, or personnel,
Mm,
as they were called before they became human
no.
resources. And nowadays, it's like this additional role that every single line manager has taken on is the health and well-being, as well as the performance of their team. I certainly find that people in those middle management roles are getting really squeezed because they've got a top down, they've got a lot of performance metrics and KPIs they've got to meet, and from the bottom up, they've got their team who are wanting more support and nurturing and coaching. And the poor middle manager is trying to do now two roles for the price of one almost.
And that's such a true description of what management became over the
Yeah.
last, I'd say, 5 to 10
Yeah.
years. Just again, there's these big expectations for middle managers, but then you've got your team that wants support at the bottom. They're trying to understand, why did you cut my hours?
Yeah.
But again, and there's just no clarity in being able to take and be able to make a decision, because if you're middle manager, you're probably spending, I'm going to say, 8 to 10 hours a week just going over data to be able to defend numbers that
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
don't necessarily have.
Now, it's a really tough place to be. Nate, I have so enjoyed this conversation with you today. If any of our listeners want to get in contact with you, what's the best way people can get in contact?
So I'm primarily on LinkedIn. Again, Nathaniel Robinson. You'll see me hanging out in my blue jacket there if you do. And then in Robinson at FLQSR. The two ways I can be reached at.
Okay, flqsr.com. Okay, so I shall put those in the show notes for everyone that they can get in contact with you. But I'd love to thank you for sharing your insight into
Yeah, absolutely.
management and leadership from your perspective. It's always great to get different perspectives from different people and how different generations view leadership and what's going on. So it's really great to
Mhm,
see because I think the only thing we know about leadership is you've got to be flexible, you've got to be agile, and it continually evolves and change, like we said. And
mhm.
we have to adapt to those five different categories of workers in the workplace. So that means leaders today need to be even more nimble and agile and adaptable to everything that's going on so that we can serve our people in the best way. So thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much. Thank you so much for your time
Yeah.
today. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you. And everyone else, everyone listening, I'd love to invite you to think about for this week, what are the three words that you would like to describe yourself? Share them with us, share them with me and Nate. We'd love to hear them. And until next week, I look forward to catching you then. Okay, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.